Do you like what you hear? Then you need a Devon bass. Devon bass. Better by design. Whether you're old school or whether you're new school, we discuss it all for the only one that matters. Welcome to another episode of For the Only One That Matters. Today's guest will be DeWayne Adcock, a former preacher, evangelist, and minister of music, now a composer of music for film. This is going to be a good interview. I think you'll enjoy it. I know I did. Let's join our interview in progress. Folks, welcome to another episode For the Only One That Matters, where I talk with Christian musicians about life, the universe, and everything. And tonight's guest is a new friend of mine, DeWayne Adcock. We share a common alma mater, and I was very, very pleased to meet him. If I remember correctly, you turned me on to my graphic artist, right?
That's right.
And you read something about mine on Facebook, and that's how we got hooked up. By the way, guy's amazing. He is totally amazing.
Yes, he
He
is.
delivered for a very good price. I will probably give him a hookup during this broadcast at some point or another.
Yeah.
So, like I said, we share a common alma mater.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find out about Vermont College of Fine Arts?
Well, interesting deal there. I wasn't planning on finding Vermont College of Fine Arts. That's the beauty of it. Yeah, I was looking at two other highly esteemed universities for film scoring,
right?
And then I honestly, Paige, I don't remember exactly how I came across VCFA. But when I got it, I felt a nudge in my spirit that I needed to pay attention to it.
Yes.
And so I was going, okay, wow, what do we do here? So I was looking at it, and the more I looked at it, the more I prayed over it. There was that peace that passes all understanding.
There's a great interpretation of that verse. I heard a preacher say once. He said, if you can imagine this in original Greek, it's like the Holy Spirit is the umpire calling a ball game, calling balls and strikes. And let God be the umpire of whatever decision you're making. And it's with me, it began, I was 57. I just finished my master's in education. I went back to school late. People take a grace year off between high school and college. I took like a couple grace decades off, just before. Yeah. And then when I went back to school, though, it was then the VCFA thing. I just saw something in passing on the internet and just sent off a question and ended up chatting with them. And I sent off a couple things that I'd written, and I have had no classical music education in my background at all. All R&B, rock, professional musician. I'm a graduate of the Armed Forces School of Music, playing big band, jazz, rock and roll, R&B, all that stuff. And no classical education at all. And I just sent off a couple things I'd done for a play that I'd been asked to underscore that I had the temerity to tell them I could do. Sometimes my chutzpah gets me in some really tight spots.
Yeah.
But it turned out really well. And I sent a couple in, and I just laughed it off. No school in the right mind. Yeah, it's a terminal degree, right? It's equivalent of a doctoral degree in some circles.
It is.
And so I thought, well, hey, let's have a laugh. I'll send this in. And they called me back and said, we'd love to have you come. So I show up for my first residency, and I'm in this room, I almost called it barracks, in the dormitory,
Mhm.
And all these musicians from that for our residency were there, and there were some of the scariest players musicians I've ever seen in my life. And I'm old. I'm the old guy in the room,
Right.
so
Yeah.
like any old dog, I just back into a corner, have my coffee, and I'm just staring at everybody. And this hippie looking dude comes up to me, and he just tells me that he says we're chatting, and he says, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "I'm in the wrong place. I'm just going to go get my bags, and I'm going to head back. I'll fly back out tomorrow. I'm in the wrong place. I don't belong here." And he says, "Well, you're Paige, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, Paige, we listen to your stuff. We think you belong here." I said, "Well, who are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Rick Bates. I'm the head of the department."
Yeah.
And he had his glasses cocked up in his head, and like no socks, jeans,
Yeah.
flannel shirt, right? Hippie, total hippie. And I'm a firm believer that if you want to understand the content of a company, you look at its upper management. And I thought to myself, well, if they're letting a hippie run this place, I got a shot. So I stuck around, and I loved it. It was great. So what happened
And
to you when you
Rick
got there?
and Rick is a very, very dear friend of mine. I studied 2 semesters under him, and we still are very much still in contact. And just yeah, he's become a good brother, good friend.
That's a good name to have in your hip pocket too, because that man knows folk,
Hmm.
and he is not afraid to give a hand to anybody that needs it.
No, yeah, yeah,
And I regret, the only regret I have about VCFA was at the time I didn't know it, but I got diagnosed with congestive heart failure about a year after I graduated.
mm,
And the underlying cause is AFib, which is your heart beats
right.
squirrely. And my entire 2 years there, I missed so many lectures and so many concerts and shows because I was exhausted. I could sleep for 16 hours and wake up tired. And I didn't know at the time. I thought, well, I'm just because I'm overweight and fat. No, it was my heart that was causing me. And so I missed out on an awful lot. If I had it to do again, I would go back now because God's got a pill for everything. And they've got most of that figured out now. And I'd go back and I'd be able to do more. But yeah, Rick was one of my buds.
Yeah, yeah. I studied under him and Ravi Krishnaswamy, and those two guided me through the program. So it was
Roger was mine. I had him for 2 semesters. I had Diane. She passed away a couple years ago.
right, Moser. Mm-hmm.
She was absolutely hands down my favorite. She
Yeah.
was Roger was an absolute gentleman, and he was kind and he was gentle, and I clicked with him. Diane, at first, I thought this is a bad mistake because she is a she was a take no prisoners kind of gal, but
Right.
you grew to love her because she had what I call the velvet fist technique, where she would tell you the hard truths, but in such a way
Mm-hmm.
at the end of it, you'd say, "Can I have another?"
Yeah.
Like she
Yeah.
came up to me once, and I was there for choral. Which is stupid because I'm not a choral guy. I mean, but you know what? This is a bucket list thing, so I'm going to go learn something I've never done before.
Yeah. Do it.
And so I'm hung up on Palestrina. Palestrina is my musical
Okay.
thing.
Yep.
And I natter on about him every chance I get. And we're going to lunch one day. She said, "Paige, can I walk with you?" I said, "Sure." She said, "I got a problem with you." I said, "Well, okay, out with it. What is it?" She said, "What is this thing about you and Palestrina? What is it about Palestrina that just drives you so obviously nuts?" And I started to explain to her about his music, blood. And she says, she just shook her head and just went, "Oh, I got to tell you something. And please know this is coming from a friend. You will never be Palestrina." And I thought she was going to give me and I thought she was slamming me for a minute. She says, "But I want you to hear this next part really, really, really carefully. Palestrina would have never been you." She says, "Understand what makes Palestrina great." And we're going to have a discussion about that later. We
Yeah.
did. But she
Yeah.
says, "Understand what it is that makes Palestrina great in your estimation." But she said, if Palestrina were alive today, he would have what you have, over 500 years of music theory and practice to build on. He would still be a genius. but his
Mhm.
music would be markedly different today than it was back then. He would
Yeah.
still be a genius. You'll never be Palestrina, but Palestrina will never be you.
Mhm.
And I remember walking away from that thinking, dodged that bullet. But I think I gained more in those conversations with her and with Roger um, than all the technical musical stuff that was passed on.
Mhm.
They were, I think that was such an amazing program.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
do you think now that they're kind of like in the throes of, some would say the death throes of VCFA?
Uh, that's a tough one. And it's I feel like in some senses I have a little bit different perspective because I've been on both sides.
Hmm.
Um, I've been on both sides as a student, but I've also been in leadership when we've had these kinds of changes too.
Right?
And I I don't think I don't think it was well, it's not I don't think. I'm firmly am convinced they did not execute this very well at all.
Judging by
Um
the comments I'm reading, yeah.
they really there were a lot of things done on the communication side, or I should say not done on the communication side, that they did not win friends and influence people, that's for sure. So I'm hopeful that they can continue, um but in the larger world of VCFA, because music comp's not the only program.
Right.
You've got your writing, you've got film, and all of that. Um, the other programs seem to really they really took this hard. Um, there was a lot of reaction from those programs. The music comp program, I'm particularly proud of the way they responded
Hmm.
uh, to what was, on a number of levels, a travesty of leadership.
Right.
Uh, they rather than pulling out pitchforks, um, they they are trying to be part of the solution for going forward. And I'm particularly proud of that. That says a lot about the character of the direct management and leadership of that particular program.
Yeah.
And so that's my take. So otherwise, I don't have a dog in this hunt. I was the last graduation before all of this transition takes place.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I don't have a dog in this hunt. So I am hopeful though, because it is a unique program.
There's not
It
another one
gives
like it. When I got accepted. All right. The reason I went is because nobody else accepted me. I ain't gonna lie. They're the only one
sure.
that said yes. But I
Yeah.
know that I didn't have the qualifications for a lot of these other programs, and for whatever reason, Rick Bates thought that I had what it took to be part of that, and I'll be forever grateful to those folks for that. I hope
Yeah,
the program can survive because I think it is an incredible opportunity.
it is. It is, and they just approach the educational model, especially in musical terms, from a really a very different standpoint than most of your traditional institutions. So yeah.
Well, what I appreciated most about it, I remember sitting down with Roger. I got him as my first professor to work with,
Mm.
and we had our first sit down. He said, "Okay, what would you like to do?" I said, "I would love to compose music in the style of 16th century choirs, church choirs. He went, huh?
Mm-hmm.
He says, nobody writes music like that anymore. And I went, yeah, ain't that great? I said, me and 12 other people will love what I do. I swear.
There you go.
But he laughed with me, not at me. He laughed with me. He said, all right, then let's go. And so I started composing a Kyrie, because my goal was to compose a mass before I was done with my residency. Didn't happen. I've instead written, I think, 14 different Kyries. I'm closing in on one that I like. But I love the way that each of my professors just rallied their wagon around what I wanted and just developed and gave me direction. Mm-hmm. And there was no lockstep thing. Nobody else was doing what I did. And I wasn't doing what anybody else did. Everybody had their own individual track, if you will. And
that's the secret sauce.
Oh, dude, I think so.
Yeah.
If you could wrap up your experience with VCFA in one sentence, I love VCFA. I love what VCFA. I can't even say those letters. I love what VCFA. What did I learn in my 2 years? I know, right? I swear I have not been drinking. I swear.
No judgment here.
One thing that would wrap up, why was your experience at VCFA so important to you?
Wow, the why question. That's interesting.
Well, why did you go?
I went. I've covered just about every part of the music industry except the film side.
Okay.
And if you know me well, I'm very driven. Mm-hmm. And I'm very purposeful, very intentional. And we can get into that later if you like, on my road of ministry and such. But I was led to VCFA. It was not a thing of, oh, I choose to go here.
It wasn't a whim.
It wasn't a whim. No, this has been in the plans for a little while. Mm-hmm. It was just when is the time going to be right? And I believe in Kairos. Mm-hmm. And so Kairos showed up, and so off we go.
There's a word for God. There's a name for God in the Old Testament. It's only seen a couple times, but it's El Roi, the God who sees me.
Yeah.
And there's some cultures in South America, I think, some native cultures, where they will look at each other and say, I see you. And what they're telling you is they love you. They see you. They see your intent. They see your heart. That's the sense of El Roi. He is the God who sees us. Right. He knows us intimately. And therefore, his timing is never wrong. Right. He sees us. So anyway, my superpower is erupting. So I apologize. I'm going to back up right now.
Well, you get into the New Testament, there are 2 main words for time. And one is chronos, and that's what we wear on our wrist. Mm-hmm. The other is kairos. And this is time according to God's measure.
Right.
And so these are moments whenever you see Paul saying redeeming the time, he's not talking about chronos. He's talking about kairos. When God brings that opportunity to you, you take advantage of it. You lean in. You go all in on it.
Oh, I love that.
Because when you're leaning in on the full blessing and force and rights and privileges of God, then nothing is going to stop you. And so that is really, so my VCFA experience in one sentence. It was a leading, it was a confirmation, it was an affirmation, there's a whole lot of semicolons in this sentence. And there and
all have that in
common. And there was a consolidation, you will. So that's how I would say that. And it was a stretch for me. I got stretched in a number of ways there. But I also know that I was also able to help some other people stretch when I went there.
Yes.
So they were a blessing to me, and I was able to be a blessing to them.
You know, it's funny. I had they performed at my the Kyrie I most like. They had this quartet of people from Boston. Oh my gosh, man, Grammy Award nominated folk, right? I mean, creme de la creme. Yeah. And I got to rehearse them. That's heady material for a kid who grew up in a fishing village in Southeast Alaska. All right, that's it's like I was just it was a dream come true.
Yeah.
And I remember my first rehearsal with them, and they said, Paige, I gotta the mezzo soprano says, Paige, we gotta confess something to you. When we got the music ahead of time for this, we saw your Kyrie. We went, oh goody, another Kyrie. Oh. But she said, we looked at it, and you're not a Catholic, are you? I went, no. I said, I'm in love with the Catholic Mass, and I've studied the Mass for the past 10 years, and I don't think there's a more concise, consolidated capsule of God's truth anywhere else on the planet. The Mass itself is stunning. I said, yeah, but I said, I decided the Kyrie is the cry of the penitent. You know, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. Right. And I used it as a vehicle to describe my conversion process, because my conversion was a little bit different than anybody else's. When I was at a church service where there's a black full gospel choir kicking it, and I'd never heard music like that. And all of a sudden I was overwhelmed with this terror. And I heard these words go through my head. Depart from me, you wicked, to the fire prepared for the devil and his angels. And I said, if the gates to hell had opened up behind me, I would have walked through because I was guilty. I had no argument. But then these words came over, but I've loved you with an everlasting love. And that's the Kyrie to the Gloria.
That's it.
You know, we cry out for God. And the Kyrie isn't oh, dear Jesus, I'm sorry. It's tinged with terror. It's tinged with horror. You have been faced with your sin, and you realize how incredibly horrific it is, and you are. That's the Kyrie. Yeah. And the Gloria falls on the heels of that when God responds and say, I've loved you with an everlasting love. So I got to share that with all of them. And she said, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. Did you have a religious moment or two where you were writing this? Because this is really different. I said, yeah. There was one day when I had like 3 hours I could throw at it. And about halfway through, I had to get up and walk away because there's only 2 lines. Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. Right. So composing is such a slow motion process. You're thinking about every note, every phrase, and just because it takes a long time to write it down, right, you're forced to think on it. And I said, as I'm doing this, I'm beginning to think that I need God's mercy for every breath that I take. I need God's mercy to wake up in the morning. If I wake up in the morning, God's been merciful. Yeah. If I'm still alive at the end of the night when I go to bed, God is merciful. And I said, I got so overwhelmed with the fact that his mercy is the underpinning of my salvation that I had to get up and walk away because I was overwhelmed with it. She says, you want to know something? We could tell. And they knocked it out of the park. I had one of my classmates there in my cohort was this young lady who had been raised in the Catholic Church, and she was very angry at the Catholic Church for a lot of very good reasons. All right. She was very angry. And she came up to me at the end of it and she slugged me. She says, I swore that I would never set foot in another church again. And that song just took me to church. And she was crying when she said it. So I must have done something right. But I love the VCFA because to me I discovered a part of me that I didn't know existed. I love choir. I love choral music. And if I could go back again, I'd go back again and do the film thing because I'm doing the choir thing, but I'm looking over here at the guys, the stuff that's filmed. Oh man, oh man.
Well, I can tell you there's a part of that where I feel I need to admonish and say, be careful what you ask for. it's it is a blessing and a curse, I tell you. Um, yeah, it's quite the it's something. I'm gearing up for two different films right now as we speak. So it's fixing to go back under the hood. So
What part of the country are you from?
I was raised in Oklahoma.
Because I'm hearing a lot of fixin' twos, and I'm thinking
Yep.
that boy's country.
Yep. Yep. I'm a third generation minister.
Okay.
I was raised in Oklahoma, all over that whole state's my backyard. My granddad pastored, held church leadership role beyond pastoring. He was a presbyter in part of Oklahoma. My dad retired from pastoring about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. And I have been preaching since I was 15. I evangelized the whole state of Oklahoma before I even graduated high school. So I've been going a while. So yeah.
Well, then now, so you've been now. Were you evangelizing, traveling, or did you pastor in a fixed place?
So in high school, I was an evangelist. I went around doing youth rallies. I was raised in Pentecostal tradition.
Assembly of God, I think.
Yes, Assemblies of God. And did a lot of youth rallies, did a lot of revivals, all of that. Went to college and went on vocal scholarship and then graduated with vocal performance degree. Um, went was planning on going straight to Nashville to be a recording artist, and the Lord just stopped me in my tracks on that deal and directed me to be a music minister in a local church.
Mm-hmm.
So got married soon after I graduated high school, or not high school, college, with my bachelor. And we had went to our first church. Wow. First church was a disaster. On a number of levels. There were some things that were beyond me. Um, I'm not going to say I was perfect, but we ran into some buzzsaws while we were there.
Churchianity can be rough, huh?
Oh man, I'll tell you, it's the worst battlefield in the world.
Yep.
But that started our trek though through vocational ministry full time. So I've served on staff, various churches covering New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. I've led worship in conferences all over, and all of that. I've been a theology professor, 3 different universities. And so it's been quite the journey. So I've been, whenever we moved to where we are now, we were moving. I was not planning on assuming a music minister role again. I somehow got roped into it, what was supposed to be a temporary 3-month agreement turned into 3.5 years. And then I was like, okay, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. The Lord changed seasons on me, and I needed to go with that.
Yeah.
And so now the Lord has been kind to me. I have been basically I did several years as pretty much a Nashville songwriter. I was writing with the same pace as Nashville. I was writing with Nashville writers. All of that, have enjoyed success in that. Had a #1 song in Southern Gospel back in 19 and everything, but I still was not creatively fulfilled. I just really, yeah, it's just tough. I felt like I was getting pigeonholed. And up until that time, especially whenever I was going through seminary, um, I was a freelance arranger, and I started arranging choir and orchestra music for some of the largest churches in the country,
Right.
and all of that, and was enjoying, good response with that. Everything was good. Um, when I got into songwriting full time, it's its own beast, and it's got its own expectations, its own processes, that kind of thing. And I was going through that. I'm co-writing left and right. I'm pumping out 275 to 350 songs a year. I mean, it was just unreal. And I just, I was like, this, I just don't feel, I'm not doing everything I can do.
Right.
And so going back to prayer, and I'm just laying this before the Lord and going, look, you've answered the cry of my heart. As a music minister, I would sit in my office at the church and I would pray, Lord, if it was possible, I would love to just sit in a room all day and write music for people.
Well,
And that's what I prayed. And the Lord answered that prayer. And I learned a very tough lesson with that. You be careful what you ask for,
yes.
because it's tough. There is a reason.
Your kid is to get what they ask for.
Yeah, and I, but he, the psalmist says, delight yourself in the Lord, he'll give you the desires of your heart. And he did. I'm living proof of what that looks like.
The upside of that is now and this is, I'm not saying this in a flip way, but now you know more about what doesn't work for you. You know what, and as you're progressing down life's path to find your spot in the body of Christ and what you're supposed to be doing, knowing what doesn't work for you is as valuable as knowing what doesn't work.
Very much so. Yes, very much so. It's I explained it to somebody like this the other day. I told them, I said, look, there are giftings that the Lord gives each and every one of us. And it may be 1, it may be 3, it may be 5, it may be 10. And yes, you can go, well, that sounds like a parable. That's right, it is. But here's the thing. Whatever he gives you, that's what you're responsible for. Yeah. And I think one of the hardest questions, to be honest with you, Paige, that we're going to have to wrestle with when we stand before God is going to be when he asks us the question, what did you do with what I gave you? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a sobering moment, I think, for a lot of people, because there's a difference between your purpose and your passion.
Right.
And a lot of times that gets mixed around and gets turned on its head. And so for me, I'm going, okay, for me, the passion and the purpose have gotten closer together. The gap has come in to where there's a nice marriage here. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I would say as an encouragement to people is be patient, because sometimes your purpose and your passion are going to be a little ways from each other. It's going to take patience and it's going to take experience for those two to come together
And
into a
experience requires
marriage.
mileage, and you don't
Yeah.
get that overnight.
Yeah. So, so I, so in all of this, the Lord is pointing me more towards visual in all of that. And so I'm thinking, okay, wow, yeah, the film. I mean, my goodness, I've never, I've never, and to say that I'm a film buff, quite frankly, would be a far reach. I have not watched nearly as many movies as a lot of people have. So I'm coming from a totally different perspective.
Right.
What happened was um, my application material that I sent into VCFA was a lot of those choir and orchestra pieces I arranged for large churches, large mass gatherings, that kind of thing. And then when when I talked to Rick, he goes, "So what are you wanting to do?" I said, "Film scoring." And he's like, "Okay,
Know that look. I know that look.
yeah, yeah." So sure enough, I get my first assignment and it was funny. I enjoyed it so much. I mean, from the first assignment that I got, I was like, this is my neurons are firing. I
I call it the square peg finding the square hole.
That's exactly it. And I mean, we were in the pocket, man. I mean, I was having a ball. And so I turned in that assignment. And so whenever I have my next meeting with Rick and we're talking over it, the first words out of his mouth are, "You really surprised me." And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, how do I take that? Because I
know,
feel
right?
like I'm either going to get ripped up or, you know, and he goes, he said, I knew you had chops. I didn't expect it to be like this. And it was just confirmation that, yeah, this is it.
You're in the right.
And so and I ended up my first semester of school, and Rick could testify to this because he's the one who told me. I had no idea, but he said I don't know that I've had a student do this many assignments, and all of that. He said you're just going right through them, and all of that. And so I'm sitting here going, okay, because there's a lot of times that I'm speaking in such a way, I want to be an encouragement to your listeners, your viewers. There's a lot of times where God will lead you into a place, and there's going to come a point where something, it's like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Why did you lead me here? What is that all about? But again, if you'll be patient and let the process go through, just because God leads you to something doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. It will be in a lot of situations.
And also doesn't mean it's going to be immediate.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
crossed my mind while you're speaking was David. He was anointed king of Israel when he was a young teenager. It was 20
Right.
plus years before he put the crown on his head.
That's exactly right.
Moses knew God's will for him.
Yep.
And then he went in the wilderness when he was 40,
Yep.
came back when he was 80 to fulfill God's plan.
Yep.
I remember at the beginning when I got saved, the experience I shared with you, one of the other things that Christ spoke into my heart was, I have a ministry for you. So I thought I was going to be a worship pastor or a preacher or whatever. And I started preparing for that. And everywhere I turned, the door slammed shut in my face. God didn't want me to be either one of those things. And I just didn't understand it. I couldn't understand it. And I remember thinking, God, what's my place in the Bible? What, you gave me music. You gave me this love for the word. And I was going through the Hebrew and the Greek and doing all this kind of stuff. And his word to me, very long story made very short, was, I do have a ministry for you. You're asking me if you can have a job in the church. That's no. But you have a ministry. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a friend.
Right.
So now that question in the back of my head was, okay, then why all this music? Because every waking moment is music to me. And it wasn't until years and years later when I remembered a line from a film called Chariots of Fire. Did you ever see that movie?
I did.
All right. The star of that film, that Scottish runner, he was preparing for the mission field with his sister, and they went to, I think, China, and I think that's where he died. But his sister, and he was also middle distance runner for the United Kingdom's Olympic team. His sister could not understand his passion for running. She says, why are you wasting all your time running? Why the obsession with running? And his answer to her came back to me and just floored me. He said, because God made me to run fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. And that was God's answer to me concerning music. I may not ever, I know I will never be a music pastor. I'll never be a pastor. But so why music in my life? Because he loves me. That's all. It's really, it's his gift to me. And yes, I'm going to seek to use it in all the ways that I can. But at the end of the day, 10 years after I'm dead, nobody will ever know I ever lived. So why use music as a vehicle to try to get fame in a world that's going to forget me in 10 years or less? Why not use this music that God has given me to bring me closer to the one who loves me so much that he put music in me? Every atom of my being is filled with music. I just, every day I wake up, I'm either teaching somebody, I'm writing something, and that took a huge pressure off me to pursue all these things I was pursuing, realizing that the sovereign God who has blessed me with this music, he'll open doors that no one can close. He'll close doors that no one can open. I'm going to enjoy God. What's that? The Westminster Confession. What is the chief aim of man?
Yeah.
Worship God and enjoy him forever.
That's it.
And
the most intimate worship you will ever have will be within the giftings that he has put in you.
Yeah. And you're a father, right? You have children?
I am. Yeah.
All right. I had 2 kids, and my daughter growing up, she would come home from school. I'd be waiting for her. And we lived in a small mini farm in Washington State. And she'd come home, walk up the road. She'd see me. She'd come running. We'd hug. And they said, Daddy, let's dance. And she put her little feet on mine. And then we would dance in the middle of this field. Tall grass, looked like wheat. But we would dance through the field. And the funniest thing about this is that my daughter to this day can't dance to save her life. When she got married and had to have the father-daughter dance, she says, Dad, please, let's not either one of us screw this up. But I can't tell you the joy in my heart watching this girl who can't dance for me, because she danced for me because she knew it gives me joy. And some of the things, some of the things I've done have been so stupid and stilted and not good in the world's eyes. But God's looking down, he's enjoying it, because you know what? You're doing what he made you to do. You're being what he made you to be. And God takes joy and pleasure from that. And you feel his pleasure when you're doing what God made you to do.
That's right.
So my heart resonates with everything you just said. Yeah. That dog will hunt.
It will.
Now, I would like to ask you about, you keep coming up with this one word keeps popping up in your thoughts and processes. All right.
Yes.
It's interesting because that became my journey at VCFA, because every musician has written music when they've been inspired, right? Anybody who's had music has written a song at some point in their life based on some experience in their life that just brought up this wellspring of emotion and whatever, and a song came out. Cool. what do you do when my journey came to find the answer to this question? What do you do when you're not inspired? When your muse won't come down off the porch and dance with you?
All
What
right.
do you do when you're
That's a
not
good
inspired?
question.
So,
Yeah.
so
So I learned I'm going to give major props to a Christian songwriter. She's one of the greatest of our generation, Susie Smith. And she has a conference called Write About Jesus. It's a songwriting conference, and she brings gospel music's best songwriters in to teach and mentor, and all of that. And that is what started my trajectory as a full-time songwriter. That's what allowed me to get relationships and be able to get into the industry side of all of that. In that, I learned, because I was one that, yes, believed that, man, you've got to be inspired to do this kind of stuff. And then I heard all of these writers, no one particular one, but all of these writers were all saying the same thing, because they're pumping out 200 and 300 songs a year. Mm-hmm. And they said, even when we don't feel it, we go to work.
Yeah.
And when we go to work, we might come out of there a couple of hours later with either 3 lines or 3 verses or 3 words. Or if it's a co-write, we just needed to have a good cup of coffee with a friend. Nothing's going to get accomplished on paper. So that really resonated with me. And I've gone back to the Lord with all of this, because I want to do things in a way that honor him, and it also helps me not depart away from gratitude. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we get so sunk into what we do as artists and all of that, we forget about the giver of the gift.
Yeah. And
so in doing all this, I went back and I realized, what they're saying makes a lot of sense, because inspiration, you don't control that. Inspiration is not something you conjure up.
You got to find a way to leave the door open so that it can saunter in and sit down beside you.
Well, and the way to do that is through discipline. Mm-hmm. Discipline is what's going to do it. So to answer your question, it's the hobbyist that's going to just sit around and wait on inspiration. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to go after professional goals and ambitions, you got to be disciplined, because inspiration will follow discipline. Inspiration does not rain on discipline's presence. Inspiration complements discipline's presence. And there, I can tell you, there have been a lot of days where I walk into the studio. I'm sitting at my piano right now. This is where I'm sitting, but I'm in the studio here, and I walk into the studio every day, and there are some days that I walk in and, man, I got nothing. I mean, I just got nothing. And it's a bad feeling, but experience has taught me, along with external influences, that you carry out the discipline and something will show up.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because that actually became, that was the core of my master's thesis, was what do you do when you don't know what to do?
Yep.
And for me, the answer came because, especially since I'm really so unfamiliar with classical choral things, and that's, that's the horse I chose to ride through my VCFA journey. How audacious was that? But I discovered that for me, that God has given me a good ear, a decent ear. It's not perfect pitch, but I have a good ear for pitch. And I discovered that if I don't know what to do, I'm writing a line, and let's say I can write. I start off all my classical writing, film scoring, anything I've ever done. I write a cantus firmus, 9 notes, just 9 notes, and I work it out, and I work the counterpoint out, and I get all of that together, and then I'll have a phrase, like, say, if I'm writing a hymn, "Oh Lord, our help in ages past," to steal a line from somebody else. Right. "Oh Lord, our help in ages past." That's 8 notes. Ah, it's cool. There's a cantus firmus. There's my 8 notes. Well, then I take those 8 notes, rhythm map it to that, "Oh Lord, how great," blah, 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 like that. And there's 8 notes. And now what do? Well, here's what I discovered. I would start playing that melody, and I would sing that melody. And I began to realize my brain, my subconscious, knows a million more things than my conscious mind knows. And I've got like 50 years of music under my belt. There's a lot of stuff up there. So I would start singing that line. Bum, ba, da, 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 da. Say if that was the melody. Yeah. And then I get to the end of that melody that I've written, and it stops. The melody stops. I just sing. I keep going. And I've found out that my brain has a lot of great ideas. That's my only way to wedge them suckers out of there. And then once that happens, it's like my muse comes in, floats down. Jesus sits down next to me at the piano or the guitar, whatever I'm writing on. He says, "All right, let's finish this." And that's what I end up doing. And I discovered that much of my fear and trepidation towards composing music was going to the end of that 8-note phrase and stopping and waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
Our God is incredible. And I don't know where I got the idea to keep on singing after that 8 notes are stopped, but I started doing that, and all of a sudden I just started all these ideas. And then it's like you can't write them down fast enough. Yeah. It's like once you realize that, and you realize you can trust your heart, you can trust what God has put in you, and all these ideas start flooding out all over the place. And when I got a chance to underscore a play, that was my whole process. It was, and I cranked it out in no time at all. And I never underscored a play. I have no freaking idea how that even works. But I met with the director, got the characters from her, and I said, "All right, I'm gonna come up with a theme for the characters." And then it just started flopping around. Like, it was amazing. And but it doesn't happen unless you're sitting down at the piano, ready to go. Yeah. You got to go to work. I like that. Yeah. You got to go to work.
Yeah, it's that's the great thing about the Lord. He doesn't tell us, "Stay away, I'll take care of it." Says, "Show up and I'll take care of it."
Yeah.
And that's I think of I think of a lot of times it's crossed my mind, and it's probably taken out of context just a little bit, but I think of Paul's words, though, when you've done all to stand therefore. Yes. Stand therefore. And for the artist, that's the thing. You've hit a wall. The block is very much in front of you. There's nothing coming. When you've done all to stand therefore. And yes. Something will.
That passage of scripture describes a Roman soldier, and all the armor that it describes. There's no armor description for the back.
Right.
Roman soldiers would stand back to back. All right. They have each other's back. But I don't know if some of my Pentecostal friends get all googly over this, but I don't know if I had a vision or if it was a dream. All I know is I was reading through that chapter, and I got this picture of the Roman soldier in a valley, and got a line of Roman soldiers here, and their weapons are drawn, and the enemy swarms, and the Roman army is totally outnumbered. The enemy swarms over the hill, and there's a huge battle, and then the enemy retreats, and he looks around, and so many of his fellow soldiers have fallen. He's exhausted. He's leaning on his sword. It's all he can do to stand. And then he hears the clarion call of the enemy's battle horn again. And you just see him go, shield up, sword up. And and the Roman soldier had a thing. They would not bow their neck to anybody. If you're going to kill me, it's going to be eyeball to eyeball. You're going to kill me with me looking at you. Yep. I mean, they were just very fierce warriors. And in this vision and dream, it's like, there's no way that they're going to hold off this swarm because so many of them have fallen. And as he's holding his place, there's another battle trumpet. And through the ranks of these soldiers comes the angels of the army of God forward and just swarms the enemy and defeats them. And then I either woke up or came to my senses or whatever. But it highlights what you're talking about. When you reach the end of your abilities, your strength, just stand.
Yeah.
It only asks you to stand.
Well, look, where you come, when you get to the end of yourself, that's where God begins.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing that is faith manifesting at that point.
Well, we serve a sovereign God.
Mm-hmm.
And when I thought God was calling me to be a worship pastor, I was actively involved as a worship leader in a worship pastor at this one church. And this lady came up to me at the end of one service. Now, every church has this lady. All right. This is a Foursquare church. Every church has this lady. And every church needs this lady because this lady, Melody, was a widow. And she spent all her time reading the word, studying, and praying. She prayed. So if Melody came up to you and said she was praying for you, dude, good things were going to happen. She had a hotline straight to the throne of God. So she comes up to me and says, Paige, I've been praying for you. I went, well, thank you, Melody. She says, yeah, I got a word for you from God. He says, be still and know that I'm God. I think God wants you to sit down. Quit doing what you're doing and be still. She walked away, and I was very disrespectful in my heart to her. Not outside. Outside, I went, Melody, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. I didn't appreciate it. Hardly at all. And in my heart, I went, you ought to stay off the caffeine and pizza before you go to bed at night. And then I just walked away thinking, whatever. So I'm walking down the street the next day, and there's a lady from another church that I administered at from time to time. She's walking on the sidewalk to me, and I'm starting to get this sinking feeling in my gut because she's looking at me. All right? She's looking at me. She comes and says, Paige, buddy, I've been praying for you. I went, really? I knew what she was going to say. She says, yeah, God says be still. What's that about? I felt like my gut was being ripped out, that God was taking my dream from me because that's what I wanted to be, was a worship pastor more than anything. We ended up going to another church for a while, and we come back to, when we moved back into town, we went back to this first church where this first originally happened, and there's a new guy leading worship there, and he knew me. His name was David. I went to him and said, David, hey, I'm back in town. I noticed you don't have a bass player. I'm available if you need me. And he looked at me, and a tear rolled out his eye. And he said, Paige, you walked in and say, God, there's my bass player. But Paige, God says no. He says, you're to be still. What does that mean? More than you know, David, more than you know. And I remember walking out of that church being absolutely furious with God. I'm driving home from church that day, and I hit the dashboard so hard that part of the dashboard fell off. Now, granted, it was a cheap Toyota, so that stuff happens.
Oh, well, yeah.
Boom. I just went, boom. I hit it hard, and I shouted, and I cussed at God. I said, God, what in the hell do you want me to do? What about my ministry? What about my ministry? And I'm just furious. I'm having an awe. If you'd seen me in the car, you would have seen a madman. And it's like, in that still, quiet voice that only God has, it's like he's sitting in the seat next to me. He said, your ministry. When was anything mine ever yours? And it's like you sucked all the air out of my lungs. And I realized that I had taken something that was God's and called it mine. And, so I go home and I spend the rest of the day praying. This is Sunday. I spent hours in my easy chair praying and repenting. I remember getting up, huge weight off my shoulders, thinking, all right, God, from this point on, I'll never call it mine again. I'm going to do what you want me to do. Fully expecting that because I'd repented, that I was going to be able to get back in the saddle and keep going at it, right? Well, then I was in the Navy. The Navy moved me. The further south we went, the nuttier that denomination's churches were. I mean, we're talking nutty Pentecostal. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. I've preached in those churches.
and as a father and a husband, I wasn't going to put my wife and my children in a place like that. So we ended up going to the best, safest, best churches for my family were Reformed Presbyterian churches.
Okay.
So for the next 15 years, I sat in churches that had no need of an enthusiastic worship leader, certainly nobody with Pentecostal leanings. But I learned about the sovereignty of God, that's what sovereignty means. He's God, period. He has the last word. He is sovereign. He will do what he will do. And he does not need my counsel. And and I finally reached a point at the end of that 15 years where I realized that if God said no, that was a good thing. And I remember telling him, all right, God, if I never pick up the guitar again or sing again, I'm okay with that because you said no, I'm good. That's awesome. I want what you want. And it was at that point he started to release me back into ministering in the body of Christ as a sideman, as a guitar player on the worship team or a bass player. And but I learned that's where I started calling him the God of all my circumstances. And if I don't understand what God's doing, all I have to do is look at my circumstances that are surrounding me, and I start to get a clear picture of what he's doing because he is going to guide me. He's going to mold me. He's going to mold me into the image of his son. That's his goal. Now, if that includes me not being a worship pastor, okay. At the end of the day, I want to hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter now into the joy of your Lord, rather than, Paige who? I never knew you. So I could care less now about my musical profession or vocation in the sense that I want to do what makes God happy. Now, music is part of that. We both know that. That's what God's gifted us with, and that's what we do. But if God were to tell me to take all my guitars and put them in a burn pile, I would do it because I know that I've got an eternity with him and 60 years with a guitar. Come on, who wins? And it's, to me, that has been the most freeing thing. Now I'm retired. I don't gig anymore. Bass guitar equipment's way too heavy to haul around. And I'm playing in a Good Friday service tomorrow, and I play at church a couple times a month. For all intents and purposes, I'm retired. I do some teaching, private lesson stuff. But I'm at the point in my life as a retired person where I get to do what I want. And all of a sudden I realize what I want is to please God at the end of the day. That's whatever that looks like. That's what I want. Yeah. And my son put it so great. And dude, when your kids grow up, they're going to drop truth bombs on you that are going to make you so stinking proud. I'd come this close to getting a record deal with the group I was in. It didn't happen, which is what usually happens. And I was whining a bit about it. And my son, in his 30s at that time, said, Dad, I'm kind of confused about all this. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're whining about not getting a record deal when 5 years after you're dead, nobody will never know you ever lived. So why are you working so hard for something that nobody will remember rather than working hard at doing what pleases God today, who will always remember? And he's just like, wow. I'd say out of the mouths of babes, but he was like 35 at the time, so I can't call him that anymore. But that's the truth.
And cut.
Yes.
We need to take a stupid moment because I need to plug in my computer or you're going to lose me. So
okay, go for it.
Just a second.
All right. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 boom boom. There we go. The Jeopardy theme song, dude. You made it through one verse of the Jeopardy theme song. That was perfect.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's what I do. I'm good. What can I say?
Works.
Yeah. Well, hey, I really appreciate this. And what I would like to do now, this is for the only one that matters. This is that's perfect. Uh, I would like to interview you again someday, but on a different podcast I have called The Emerging Composer. Now, I have 3 podcasts. I do a Bible devotion every day. This one, where Christian musicians just talk shop about being a Christian, primarily in the context of music. But then The Emerging Composer is pretty strictly musical. And it would be really, really cool to interview you and talk about specifically projects you're working on, your musical process, what gosh, what composing software do you use? Are you a Finale guy?
Oh, okay. So you have to clarify that. Okay. So for notation,
Yes.
I am on Dorico. I was on Finale for years, decades. Have moved over to Dorico. Love it. It's the future of notation.
I
That's
use
just all.
MuseScore, and I've been really, really happy with that. But I'm starting to hear rumblings about this Dorico thing.
Yeah, you need to jump on board. It's good. It's good. And the support is fantastic. It's just no, what Dorico has done in 5-6 years of existence, they're doing things Finale can't do. And that's after 20-30 years worth
Right.
of, so Sibelius is still out there, but it's, and those two are going to keep their loyal base and all of that. But no, Dorico has interrupted the game considerably, and it's awesome.
I like
really
MuseScore because it's an open source application program.
Right.
So you have people from all over the world that are working it, and they're very regular in their updates, and I find it much more intuitive than Finale ever was. I tried to do Finale. I had to do Finale when I was at VCFA because that's what everybody wanted. But the minute I was done with that.
Yeah, they at VCFA they called me the Dorico evangelist. Because I was trying to, well, I mean, it just, I've had so many years. I know the guy who invented Finale. Personal friends with he and his wife, and we've had some good times together. But the Dorico just, I mean, those guys, they have knocked it out of the park. They've got Dorico is owned by Steinberg. Steinberg is who makes Cubase and Nuendo.
Yes.
And so they have the power of Steinberg behind them. And so you've got the same video engine. If you're doing scoring, you've got the same video engine that is in Cubase and Nuendo inside of Dorico. You also have some sequencing capabilities inside of Dorico that you cannot do. You just can't do it in Finale or Sibelius. Does not exist. And MuseScore. MuseScore has come a long way, especially with this latest edition that they came out with. They've added a lot. I'm still going to call Dorico the superior software over the other 3, though. They just do really well. If there's an unknown notation that also it has its own little quirks that makes it pretty cool. Right. It's Notion by PreSonus. Mm-hmm. They've got some pretty cool little stuff in there. It's not totally, I'm not going to call it professional grade yet, but and I don't know if they'll ever get there. I don't know if they're putting their focus on that, but yeah, it's good. I'm pretty proficient on all of the notation softwares. I've messed around with just about all of them. So cool. So yeah, I use Nuendo as my production software. Okay. That's great. That's
I'm
wonderful.
using OBS for my video platform, recording video platform, and I'm using like OBS right now. That's what's giving us this
Right.
for Zoom. And then I use let's see here. I've got several here. I've become really disaffected. I'm using Camtasia for my video editing because I'm not doing any super film type stuff. It's just video podcast stuff. So this perfect for that.
Yeah.
If I was to do film stuff, though, I'd probably go to something higher with a little bit more juice to it, like Adobe has a good platform.
Yeah. DaVinci Resolve is starting to become the industry standard now.
Dude, you're like the third person this last week that's mentioned that. That must be God telling me something.
They're amazing. They are amazing. Yeah, Premiere Pro is good, solid, that kind of thing. DaVinci is they're taking their market share away from them. Yeah, that's what I use in my video production and editing. Camtasia, I'm very familiar with it. That's a great software for what you're doing here.
Yeah, I know enough not to push the limits with it because it doesn't have it's not a DaVinci or Adobe, but for simple video editing, cutting and splicing.
Yeah. Something like Camtasia or Filmora. Filmora is a good kind of intermediate level film editing. HitFilm Pro is a great software as well. Excuse me. If you go to fxhome.com, you can find more about HitFilm Pro. Okay. They're across the pond. But they've got kind of a comprehensive software, does really well in video editing. Right. But it also has some significant motion graphic capability in it as well. So it's kind of the marriage between Premiere Pro and After Effects. So it's it can do a lot. I used it for quite a good while. I'm on DaVinci now whenever I'm doing video side.
Well, that might be something we could that we will look at then at the Emerging Composer when we do it. Like, I'd like to see your process for film composing.
Okay, that
would be sweet. And there's I have a whole bunch of music nerd questions that
bring it on.
The other thing to close on, that was the other thing that blessed me so much about VCFA was that I would be in a room and I'd make some obscure reference. I mean, really obscure reference to Bach or something, and somebody across the room would giggle because they got it. And it was amazing to be in a room full of people where everybody was as passionate about music as I was and loved it at least as much as I did, if not more. Yeah. And I'm used to being, everywhere I've been, I'm used to being the big dog in the porch. I don't seek it, but when you spend 50 years studying music and music theory, you're the big dog in the porch in a lot of places.
Yeah, I'm there.
It's so incredible to be at a place where my first question was, do I even belong on this porch?
Yeah.
And it's that became part of my mission to find out if I could hang with these guys.
But then you find out that you have found your people.
Yeah, they're my tribe, and they're a weird bunch, dude.
They are a weird bunch. That's for sure. Yes. Everybody's normal till you get to know them. So,
well, brother, this has been incredible. This has probably been one of the funnest hours I've spent in a long time. We will definitely have to do this again.
Sure. Did we cover the questions that you wanted to cover? Or?
Oh, probably not, but we covered all the questions that God wanted answered.
Okay, well,
it's funny. I always start off these interviews with a fixed idea, and then as you start talking with somebody, it's kind of the conversation steers this way and that way. I've purposely set these things up to be a conversation between two friends and not a journalistic interview type thing. And there are some questions I set out thinking, because I didn't know you before now. I didn't know a whole bunch about you. Right. And so I had some questions to ask, and that would get the ball rolling. But dude, within 30 seconds, the ball was rolling. So I'm not going to stop it. It went where God wanted it to go, and I'm perfectly happy with the end result.
Well, I'm good for another hour. If you want to jump into those questions, we can, I was prepared for a 2-hour deal. So,
Dude. Well, I'll tell you what, I do have to run because I have to get ready. I'm playing Good Friday service tomorrow. And I've got a new piece of gear that I've got to learn. It's a Helix, Line 6 Helix.
oh yeah, I've got the Firehawk. So yeah,
this thing is so stinking amazing. I think by the time I learn it, I'm going to be able to fly a 747 without much issue. It's
awesome. Yeah.
But we'll definitely do it. We'll do this again for my Emerging Composer podcast. Just email me or message me. Let me know what days are good for you, and we'll set up a date, and we'll just do this again.
It would be better if you just shot me a date and let me, because it's whenever this comes into the whole workflow thing.
Yep.
Whenever I jump in on a film, I'm in. And so
you got to shut the door to other things.
Yeah, I never know. I really never know. And so, no, just let me know when you want me back on. I'm happy to talk about discipleship, artistic things, and you name it. I'm good for it. So, yeah, we can do it.
So. Well, fantastic. It was wonderful meeting you, and it's nice to meet another brother of God that's doing all this nutty stuff. And we will do this again.
All right. Sounds good.
See you, my friend. Be good.
All right. You too. We'll see you.
Bye. Bye. Much thanks to DeWayne Adcock for giving me of his time tonight. I appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for another episode of For the Only One That Matters. God's blessings.